I'll be speaking to you on environmentalism and Indigenous rights, the Sami in the Nordic countries. So it's well known that the pollution caused by the extraction of fossil fuels impacts not only non-human environments, but directly compromises human welfare and agriculture globally. It's an issue of international human rights, as well as the rights of non-human biomes. In continental Scandinavia, the communities most adversely affected by the region's ambitious economic plans, the so-called Nordic model of welfare, are the Sami, a semi-nomadic indigenous people whose sustainable livelihoods and ancestral territories in the Arctic are continually threatened by economistic paradigms. And these threats and their implications are what I want to talk to you today. So to take but one example, in the late 1970s, Norway failed to consider the impact of major hydroelectric developments on Sami reindeer herding, with tragic consequences. When the plan to dam the river was confirmed, protesters chained themselves to the building site, only to be removed forcibly by the police. The Alta Kautokeino waterway was completed in 1987, despite an official injunction to the Norwegian government, blockades, and massive protests in the capital of Oslo, including a hunger strike that left several participants in critical condition. Throughout the events, Sami activists were principally non-violent, but received a hostile reception from the government officials. And the threats continue. Not only hydropower projects, but wind farms, roads, electric power lines, and the holiday industry put reindeer herding at risk. In addition, the United States Geological Survey indicates that 25% of the world's untapped petroleum lies beneath the Arctic, some of it directly under Sami territory. So the proximity of these threats were felt as recently as 2015, when plans to reopen the Kautokeino copper gold mines was put on hold following a successful 4-year moratorium by the Kautokeino Municipal Council. But the event shows the uncertainty of the livelihoods in this area of the world and the jeopardy in which human rights is continually placed as a result of outside pressures driven by economistic motives. The situation is compounded by the fact that the economistic motives I've been mentioning are often advertised as environmental or green. Hydropower, for instance, is a renewable source of energy, even though it demands long-term disruption to local ecosystems. In this way, the short-term aims of hydropower clashes with the long-term horizons of reindeer herding. In addition, many Sami are forced to contribute to the very industries that undermine their traditional livelihoods when reindeer herding becomes financially unviable. Poverty is a problem in the far north. So Sami culture is inseparable from its connection to specific geographies and places. You can't herd reindeer anywhere in the world. And the violation of Sami human rights is an example of environmental colonialism, or the disruptions to local ecosystems caused when cultures foreign to a local community exploit its resources for economistic and personal gain. In Scandinavia, environmental colonialism has a long and tangled history, beginning in earnest during the early modern period, when missionaries and travelers from the south began journeying to the north in order to establish mines, and in the process document Sami practices. One scholar has described it as a, quote, double colonial process. In order to control the land, resources, and people, it was necessary to appropriate local customs so as to gain the respect of Sami communities. But it was also necessary to present Sami culture as backward and superstitious in order to justify rule. One serious repercussion of Scandinavian colonialism has been its effect on the environment. Sami reindeer herding demands a keen sense for place. Sami culture also encourages the hallowing of specific landmarks, which are considered the residence of ancestral and nature spirits. When Sami culture is othered, so too are the environmentally beneficial practices implicit in Sami traditional livelihoods. As a result, the significance of the knowledges and practices at stake are obscured, and the interests of Sami cultures have been seen as irrelevant to mainstream Scandinavian society, further complicating the attempt of Sami environmental activists to make their voices heard in the Scandinavian South. A similar situation prevails in relation to Greenlandic indigenous communities with regard to Danish rules. The escalation of the climate crisis and the introduction recently of the Anthropocene as a name of our current geological epoch has begun to change all this, making the interests of Indigenous groups more and more difficult to ignore, for they are the interests of the planet. In the humanities too, scholars are beginning to listen to the epistemologies and worldviews of Indigenous groups. The work of Lillian Kerber and other writers collaborating on the Arctic Environmental Modernities volume that came out in 2017 was a really important landmark for redressing environmental colonialism in Scandinavia. But these are vanishingly small glimmers of hope. Mostly, we have not listened. Thank you very much for your time.